Central Virginia, it's a place we call home, where we work, play, and raise our families. But it's becoming a place where we fear for our lives, our children's lives, as they play outside, lay asleep at night in bed. And the thought probably never crossed your mind, but now graduation.
We had a total of 7 individuals with gunshot wounds. 3 are considered life-threatening.
I can't shake the image of him receiving CPR on the ground, still in his graduation gown.
Is nothing sacred any longer.
We got to get the guns off our streets.
Hey, hey, ho, ho. All these guns have got to go.
When are we going to start putting the people who commit these crimes in jail?
And you put them back out in the streets so they can do it again?
We continue to tolerate the intolerable.
Gun violence is the #1 killer of children today.
I have 3 prayer vigils scheduled in 1 week.
In 60 days, you have laid 22 bodies from gun violence beside my son.
Oh, such a cute baby, loving baby.
I never would have expected it to be my little brother.
I just was at the wrong place at the wrong time.
I wake up every night asking myself, why to kill my boy?
This was a senseless murder. He was only 10 years old. He had a whole life ahead of him.
So many murders. You can't process one before the other one happens.
I hate the fact that so many kids are dying.
The era of youth violence is plaguing RVA, impacting us all. So how do we fix it? Well, tonight, driving the conversation is your voice. We've all heard the cliche, it takes a village. Well, you are that village.
The community need to realize that we have to prepare for war in the time of peace. It is wartime.
Us as a people, us as a community, it matters.
We need to put our arms around these people and help them instead of pointing fingers and judging them.
I'm just going to be honest, we have not done a good job.
The adults are failing.
I am taking ownership of this problem.
How long, not long? You know what I mean? Before we change, before we take accountability of who we are and the actions that we're taking in destroying families.
The leadership has to put away the political differences.
Actually finding common ground and not just making talking points.
Stop blaming other people for the actions that you're doing yourself.
There's so many things that y'all could be doing with y'all time besides killing each other. If you see any of these kids with guns, tell them put them down. It's not right.
The shadows. Make a difference. This is your neighborhood. Take it back.
Neighborhood, take it back. One of the underlying messages tonight, your voice, your community. Thank you so much for being here with us tonight, and welcome to the CBS 6 Town Hall on gun violence. The goal is to bring community members together so that we can start talking solutions. Talk first, implement, take action, and then hold one another accountable. Now, unfortunately, the violence that happened on June 6th after a high school graduation continues. It left 2 people dead and a city in shock. It's time to change. I'm Janine Samuels.
And I'm Bill Fitzgerald. Our colleagues John Burkett and Reba Hollingsworth are standing by. John will interview people in person. If you're in here and you have a question, you'll go over to John and tell him so. Reba will be monitoring our questions that come in through our streaming on Facebook Live or other social media. Now, we've reached out to a number of prominent civic leaders and figures, as well as the larger community, to hear those voices, as many as possible, so that we can take a significant step tonight. We'll measure ourselves on exactly how we follow through on what we talk about tonight. Otherwise, it's just talk. But if one thing is clear, it's that any solution or solutions that we talk about today is going to involve every neighborhood of Richmond, not just the ones that you might see on the news.
And like Bill mentioned, we reached out to a lot of people through a survey, but then also across the Richmond community to be a part of this panel and also the part of the audience. So now I would love to introduce our panelists. We're going to start to the far your left, Superintendent Jason Camrus. Jason Cameras has served as the superintendent of Richmond Public Schools for 5 years. Before that, he held several leadership positions in Washington, D.C. school system. Cameras was present at the June 6th mass shooting outside the Altria Theater that followed Huguenot High School's graduation. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Cruz Sherman is a Richmond police chaplain and the founder of Virginians in Action. It's a nonprofit that works to prevent gun violence. Decades ago, he was involved with a gang in Memphis, Tennessee, but he turned his life around. Sherman is now an ordained minister who has worked with law enforcement across Central Virginia for more than 20 years.
Robert Bowling. Robert Bowling is the CEO of Child Savers. It's a nonprofit that focuses on children's mental health. Child Savers is the oldest provider of mental health services for children in Richmond. They've also worked with Huguenot High School families and therapists with emergency mental health support after that mass shooting following the school's graduation. Acting Police Chief Rick Edwards has served as the head of the Richmond Police Department since last October, and before that he worked in the department for more than 20 years. Acting Chief Edwards led the department through the June 6th mass shooting outside the Altria Theater that followed that Huguenot graduation. Thank you for being here.
And to my left, Thelma Samuels. She is an 8th grade teacher at Benford Middle School and lifelong Richmond resident. She is an outspoken advocate against the lack of safety and security in our schools. She has also lost, unfortunately, students to gun violence. Yes. Commonwealth's attorney Colette McEachin has served in her position since 2019, and before that worked in the CA's office for more than 25 years. CA McEachin has prosecuted crimes at every level, from domestic violence to burglaries, rape, and homicides. Her office will actually prosecute the suspect in the June 6th mass shooting.
Tanya Simmons Williams is a mother still searching for answers after her daughter was lost to gun violence more than a year ago. Demetrice Simmons was shot and killed in her apartment in the Fairfield Court area back in May of 2022. Since then, Simmons Williams has been pushing to find her daughter's killer, hoping someone will come forward with information that leads to an answer. Brian Swan, since retiring from the ATF in 2012 as Chief of Crime Groups and Gangs, Brian has served as Deputy Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security under 2 governors, Glenn Youngkin and Bob McDonnell. He also served as Director of Public Safety for the Richmond Redevelopment and Housing Authority. So we have collected data from the Richmond Police to get a sense of where we are right now as far as the numbers that can help quantify gun violence.
In addition to that, we sent out a survey and literally asked our community to respond to it. We had over 600 responses within a week. We wanted to know from a variety of people, variety of ages, races, backgrounds, to provide their thoughts on what they feel are the top contributors to gun violence. Here's what we found.
Recent data from Richmond Police shed light on the city's current trends in gun violence. There have been 37 homicides in Richmond so far this year, 97% involving the use of a firearm. That number puts the city on pace to reach more than 70 by year's end, a 25% rise from 2022's total of 57 homicides. Richmond police also point to a troubling rise in thefts of firearms from vehicles. While they don't have numbers for the current year, 2022 saw a nearly 73% jump in such thefts, 714 compared to 413 in 2021.
And here's what our community is saying about these trends. CBS 6 received 614 responses to our Stop the Violence survey. Close to 39% say they were personally impacted by gun violence or had a loved one who was affected by gun violence. As for what's causing the rise in crime, more than a third say guns are too accessible. Nearly 11% say there are not enough mental health resources available, with the same number pointing to a lack of accountability for public officials. Other factors cited include poor parenting, that parents are not held accountable, that single parents struggle to raise their children, or that there is a lack of discipline in the home. Also included in the top 5, a concern that penalties for offenders were not harsh enough.
More than 50% of the respondents indicated gun violence or gun violence involving youth were among their top 2 concerns, followed by safety in schools, physical and verbal abuse, and cyberbullying. Those responses mirror the alarming 39% who say they're extremely worried by gun violence. That compares to just 8% of participants who say they worry very little about gun violence. 56% of those that filled out the questionnaire either do not feel safe in their community or only feel safe some of the time.
Based on the comments and questions, there was an overwhelming sense of the need to come together to get to the root cause of violence, talk less and implement more. Hold people accountable, and create safe environments for our families. Now is the time. Your voice, your community.
So those numbers may tell a dark story, but we're hoping that the voices of the community in this room tonight and coming in online can help us write another story. As we shared earlier, tonight is about hearing your voice and coming together to develop solutions.
So I'm sure you all are ready to start this conversation. So here is how tonight will actually work. You just saw in the video that the top 3 contributors based on the respondents to gun violence are: number 1, that guns are too accessible. The second one was that there are not enough mental health resources available to our community members. And the third one, just a lack of accountability for public officials. So we're going to start the questions in those 3 areas at first. And then the second half of the evening will be open Q&A, open conversation about any topics that might be in your heart and in your head.
And so if you have a question that you would like to ask, please go over to John Burkett there, form a line, and we'll get to your question. And of course, Reba is standing by for any or all questions that we get coming through Facebook and other social media on the live stream.
So the first topic that we want to discuss are guns being too accessible. So if you have any questions, like Bill said, go ahead and make your way over to John Burkett. Now, since we want to make sure that we give as many of you the opportunity to ask questions and be heard, we do ask that you try to make your stories and your questions as concise as possible. But we're going to go ahead and get started as you all start walking over, hopefully, to ask questions. But as you do that, we're going to get started with a question from one of our community members, Harry Dandridge.
His ex-wife's boyfriend shot him in the back and killed him right in front of his daughter. So he was a felon. How did he get the weapon? That's my point. How did you get the weapon?
So that is the question. How did this felon get the weapon? We've heard about whether we need to change laws. Are the laws on the books enough? But the bottom line is, how did this felon get a weapon? So I want to open that up to anybody that feels they want to step up to that. Should we start with you, Chief? Like, in your experience, what would be the answer to Mr. Dandridge's question?
Well, I don't know the specific on that case, but I can tell you that convicted felons cannot lawfully purchase a firearm. So they can't go to a federally licensed firearms dealer and buy a gun like anyone else. They must do it either through a private sale where there is no background check, or more likely what we're seeing in our city and municipalities around the country is theft from motor vehicles where a gun is left in there. You didn't have it in your stats, but I track those stats every day. 268 guns have been taken out of cars. Many of those cars are unlocked. So when, by the very nature of how that gun is obtained, it's unlawful. So someone steals a gun, they should not possess it. So we know that's where the majority of our crime guns are coming from, and that is a huge concern for me. So much so that we have taken it upon ourselves in the Richmond Police Department to purchase safes, so that if you know someone who has a gun that they can't secure, they can't afford a safe, call the Richmond Police Department and we will provide one to you. Every one of those guns that is in the hands of a person who shouldn't have it is a risk to our community.
And anyone else?
Warfare shot him in the back and killed him right in front of his door. So he was a felon. How did he get the weapon? That's my point. How did he get the weapon?
Cruz, do you want to weigh in on that? Just what you have seen on the streets?
First of all, thank you all for allowing me to be a part of this platform. I can't be politically correct tonight. I may not
lean into your microphone because you're soft spoken.
I may not have another interview or what have you, so I have to come and tell the truth. A lot of times when I hear the debate about guns and accessibility to them, my mind always focuses on, we're looking at the inanimated object here, but what is the real driver behind it is the person. If you can take a knife, you can take a car, you can take anything, you can take a bomb and still destroy people. I know we have access to guns, we have a lot of laws, but the laws basically handcuff the abiding citizens. It will not do anything for anybody that has an intent on doing bodily harm to somebody.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
I can weigh in a little bit, and that is, having worked with ATF for 25 years, the accessibility of firearms is prolific, and it's always going to be that way. There are so many firearms on the street, Rick, you know this, that if you recall back in the early 90s, Richmond was known as the iron pipeline to New York City, where there were people were buying multiple firearms and taking them to New York, bringing them back. We stopped that. I believe it was Governor Waller that passed the one gun a month law. That was eventually repealed, but it's now back in place. That's an example, though, of a very commonsensical law that had immediate impact on the accessibility of crime guns to bad guys. I was working trafficking cases at that time. They literally stopped that day. And because of that one law being passed. Now, there were some that continued on, but they're much smaller scale because you could only go in and buy one firearm as opposed to 20. So I don't know that we're ever going to get rid of the number of firearms that are on the street, but we can certainly pass commonsensical gun laws that can have an impact on the criminal element and make it more difficult for them to have that access and to use them in a criminal manner. So.
Right, and following that line as far as thinking about solutions, so definitely having that visibility or clarification on how guns are getting into the wrong hands. One comment that came up quite a lot in the survey was about Project Exile and the success that had years ago. Are there any other solutions that we can start talking about to make sure that the wrong people don't get access to guns?
I think the question is, who do you consider the wrong person? Obviously, our society has decided that if you are a felon, you should not be able to possess a gun. However, a lot of the crime that happens in Richmond is committed by juveniles who are not felons, or adults who are not felons, or people who have access to guns because you can go on Amazon and buy a gun for $500. You can go to a friend's house and say you need to borrow their piece and do what you want to do and then bring the piece back or throw it in the James River. And so the issue is not that we need necessarily more laws restricting the purchase of firearms in, as the chief of police said, in a place that is a registered firearms dealer. The issue is, how do you keep guns off the street from people who were buying those guns off the street.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that? So is Project Exile, is that something that people are talking about in terms of bringing it back? Chief, do you know, was that something that partnering with the federal agencies, appropriate ones, does that have an impact? Because obviously there are questions about civil liberties and that certain communities are affected more than others. What's your take on that?
Well, certainly those laws are still in place, regardless of what's called. But if you're a convicted felon in possession of a firearm, you can be charged in the state court or the federal system. Every gun arrest we make is evaluated by a team of detectives and the Commonwealth Attorney and the U.S. attorneys to decide what's the appropriate venue for it. So I think that's just a piece of the puzzle. But to Ms. McEachin's point, many of our shooters are people who have easy access to firearms with low impulse control. And when we look at our murders and we look at our non-fatal shootings, most of them are over disputes. When I started in the 90s, and Brian was in Richmond as an ATF agent, most of our shootings were related to drug turf. When Richmond was the murder capital of the country in 1994 with 160 murders, that's what it was about. They were protecting territory. Jeanine and I were at the University of Richmond in the 90s, and every night I would watch the news, and there'd be blood on the streets in this city while I'm at University of Richmond, and I didn't see that there. But I saw the images of our city with blood on the streets, and thankfully we're not at that place now. But just 2 years ago, in 2021, we had 90 murders in our city. We almost reached triple digits again, and it's my commitment to this city that we're never going to get to that point again, and we're going to do it through smart policing, through working with our partners, and by making sure that we utilize the strategies in collaboration with our community members to avoid that.
All right, let's go to John Burkett now.
So guys, staying with me is Jose Rodriguez. He's from South Richmond. This is a father whose life changed for the worst in August 9th of 2021. Jose, what's your question?
My question is, when I'm going to have an answer for my son's murder? Because it's almost 2 years. Next month is going to be 2 years that he get killed, and I don't have no answer yet. So that's why I ask you, give me some answers. See if they got anybody. They think one day these people are going to pay for what they do to my boy. I'm sorry, but every time I talk about my boy, I can't stop crying because I miss him so much. And that's why I ask, when I'm going to have an answer. Why did he kill? Who killed him? The people pay for what they do to my son. Please, I'm begging you. I want some answers. And some people in the street, is feel like don't try to do any damage anymore. Think about before doing anything. Because when you kill somebody, you do damage and the families. And think about they do damage to you too, because your family, they don't want to see you anymore when they caught you for what they do. You go to the rest of your life in jail, and your family, they don't want to see you anymore. Come on, man. Think about and think how much damage to do to the whole family when you do that. Please, please, think it before you do anything like that.
Thank you, Jose.
So,
First, I want to just say how sorry I am for you and your family. I still view myself as a homicide detective. That's what I spent most of my career. So I've sat at that table with families. I've seen the pain that I see in your eyes right now, and I want to apologize, and I want to thank you for coming and sharing. On your specific case, I'd like Deputy Chief El-Amin to meet with you after this, and let's talk where we can sit down with the detective assigned to your case and give you the updates you want. But I can tell you that, I'm very proud of the Richmond Police Department's Major Crimes Division. They work relentlessly on these cases. We have a clearance rate year to date of over 67%, which is well above the national average. But I know that doesn't, for those families that are still wanting to know what happens, that doesn't assuage your pain. And I know there are many others in our city who are left wondering what happened to that person, to their loved one, what their last minutes were like. So I want to say that, you know, on behalf of the Richmond Police Department, we stand with you, and we apologize for what's happened to you, and I just feel terrible, and we're going to get you those updates that we need to get you. And I would just ask everyone who heard that message that may be thinking of retribution, that may be thinking of taking a gun in their hands, to listen to this family and see what's happened to them.
A concrete step. Thank you for
Tanya,
that.
I know that you are in a similar situation. Did you want to weigh in on this?
I do. Because just like Mr. Rodriguez, I cry every day. I cry every day. I cry sometimes 2-3 times a day. Then I get angry because we have no answers, because we just have to sit and we have to keep waiting, and we have to keep waiting, and we wait every day for somebody to come and do the right thing. When this happened to us, when this happened to me, so many questions that came to me, I didn't even know how to answer anymore. And I don't want anybody else to have to figure out how to answer the question about how many children you have. To answer the question about what happened and you can only say you don't know what happened. To keep waiting for the phone call for somebody to come and say that finally justice is being served. It's the hardest thing we've had to live through for this past year. We don't want anybody else to do this. Nobody sitting in this room, nobody watching on Facebook wants to feel this type of pain, because it's nothing that's gonna ever go away. It's never gonna go away. But I don't want anybody in this room to feel that. I don't want anybody online watching to feel that. But for those of us who do feel that, we deserve justice. We deserve change. We deserve answers.
Sorry for your pain, and thank you for sharing. And as you can tell, there's so much trauma in this room, and we're talking about trauma, civic trauma. You know, whether you saw the statistics, whether you're personally affected or not, but you hear these stories, you can't help but be affected. And if you live in the city of Richmond, or if you live in Central Virginia, you care about this and you care about the trauma and to help with that trauma. So as you heard, the second point tonight we're going to talk about is access to mental health resources. You heard the chief mention, and others have said that back in the day, things used to be settled with fists. Now, no impulse control, reach for a gun, and the result is final. The result is tragedy in an instant. So we're going to shift the conversation just a little bit to talk about getting access to mental health resources. And I think, Robert, if you could just start us off on that, because obviously, boots on the ground, you see the children and you see the trauma, as do school officials as well.
Sure. Thanks, Bill. And really, for Jose and for Tanya, really sorry for your loss. And we do need to do something in community to really support these families who've experienced this tremendous trauma in their lives. But I think one of the stats that we saw earlier today, when it focused on the availability of mental health resources to support people, is just not enough. We've been at this work for nearly 100 years. really trying to help families find the resources to first survive, and then secondly, to thrive. And so our work is really focused in two areas on the mental health side. One is to provide the outpatient therapeutic supports for families who've experienced this tremendous trauma. And secondly, to be available in emergency situations immediately after a traumatic event. And it's our view that investments in this area need to be a priority for our community. Until the ideal goal would be to put people like me and our organization out of business, that we wouldn't have to address these kinds of issues. But our reality is that so many children at very young ages are experiencing levels of trauma, either personally or viewed, that is really softening and normalizing traumatic events. A recent CDC study talked about the impact of social media on traumatic events in communities, and that's having a tremendous impact when somebody can talk to you and not have a face-to-face conversation. I think the thing we talk about a lot is, it used to be a fist fight or a knife fight rather than a gunfight, and it's harder to regulate that when you're doing it through a screen. It's harder to do. And so I think we as a community need to refocus our efforts to provide the mental health supports, but also to value every single citizen or resident in our community. And what we spend a lot of time doing is dehumanizing kids for behaviors, but those behaviors come about because children have experienced significant trauma. And that trauma can look like the death of someone very close to you. It could be your separation from someone you love, whether the person is incarcerated or through death. It could also look like things around domestic violence that happens in the home. And so I think we as a community need to really start thinking about how do we build a community where everyone in this space can prosper. And I know I'm going a little long, but I think it's really important to really think about the elimination of guns to the extent that we can, decrease the availability of guns, to increase the level of mental health supports in communities. And the third and most important thing is, how do we create economic prosperity so every person in our community has a possibility to grow, every person. And so instead of going to our corners and having this conversation, we need to find that space in between to provide additional supports so that kids can have activities to do that won't lead to this level of violence.
Right, and one thing you mentioned, which was also echoed in our survey, you mentioned lack of respect for one another. That was literally number 6 on our list. A lack of respect for one another and human life. So we want to go now to John Burkett. There is a line there, so we have some questions. We'd love to get more questions.
So Janine, I'm standing with Charles Willis. He's a community activist. I've known Charles for decades. Charles is out in the community. Every time a youth especially is involved in a homicide or a shooting, Charles is there. And your question is what?
My question is simply, number one, I want to say very quickly that with our youth, as he explained, that our young folks are going through a change right now. The main thing I found out with our youth, John, and others, is that our kids are not scared of no consequences anymore, especially in our education system. And I say it often, folks that are scared is the fact that our teachers are scared of the principals, our principals are scared of the superintendent, superintendent's scared of the school board's scared of the parents are scared of the kids, and the kids are scared of nobody. And that's the part that we really got to look at and take a straight look at it. So for our kids, both to our superintendent, a question I have, as well as any others on the panel, is that there got to be some kind of solution for our youth, because the violence is among our youth right now. What do you have that you believe that would work to help stop the violence with our youth, not only in our community, but in our schools?
Charles.
And most likely they'd have to be staying in school to start.
Thank you, Mr. Willis, and thank you for all your support when we tragically have to step in and support families facing tragedy. Look, I don't think I've ever met or heard of a happy and healthy young person who picks up a gun and shoots somebody. A lot of our kids are truly hopeless. A lot of our kids were suffering enormous trauma before COVID-19. And then when COVID-19 hit, rates of homelessness went up, food insecurity went up, abuse went up, and there were no teachers to come and tell in person, hey, I need to get some help. All of that got worse. And we've put the masks away, and folks understandably want to put the pandemic behind us. But we can't forget the impact that that had on an already very difficult situation. And so we have a lot of kids who quite literally have experienced trauma after trauma after trauma, and it's hard for many of us to put ourselves in their mindset, but if you have experienced utter hopelessness, it's not far from there to pick up a gun to solve your issue. And so I would agree with Robert and so many others, this is about so much more than just taking away the guns, though I am a huge supporter of that. It's about creating hope in our kids, that there is a future for them. It's about getting them the mental health that they need. We know in education, the brain science, when you grow up with repeated trauma, your brain physically actually changes, and you're more likely in situations of tension to have a spike in cortisol, which inhibits your decision-making ability. So we should not be surprised when kids are suffering repeated trauma, repeated trauma, repeated trauma. There is an ocean of guns. You put those two things together, coming off a once-in-a-century tragedy, basically, that deeply affected our kids and families, and here we are. What I get frustrated about is we actually have the resources to tackle this. So, like Mr. Sherman, I will be politically incorrect. You know, the state of Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia, is sitting on a multi-billion-dollar surplus. Come on, Jason, tell me. And the General Assembly's own research arm, nonpartisan, called JLARC, they released a study this week saying that the Commonwealth of Virginia is underfunding schools by billions of dollars. That's hundreds of counselors in Richmond Public Schools, and dozens of psychologists, and triple the number of after-school programs, and everything else that would make a difference. And yet, those elected to make these decisions have decided it's just not that important. That's got to change.
And to stay on that topic of trauma, Thelma Samuels, a 8th grade teacher at Binford Middle School, you've seen it in your students and indeed experienced loss in your classroom.
Yes, I did. I wanted to piggyback on the mental health part. As a teacher, going through losing a student that you see every day, that comes to you and talks to you, who gives you hugs and just thanks you for listening to them because they are going through things outside of school that maybe their parents are not listening to them, or can't talk to nobody else or don't feel comfortable. So as a teacher, when I had just one experience when I had a student who passed away, he was a 7th grader. We as a teacher had to tuck our emotions to be there for the students. And I don't think nobody realized how it affected the teachers, because we see these students every day also. We talk to these students every day. I take them to lunch, I take them to the gym, I interact with these students. I interact more than the principals do, than the people in the office do. So a mental health day for teachers is very important. We go through trauma too. That definitely changed my mindset in the school system. This is my first year being a teacher, and I went through a death of a student and it changed my life. I have no kids. So something like that, having that connection with the student that's not even mine, hurt me so bad to the point it almost made me not want to be a teacher anymore, because I didn't want to feel that feeling anymore. That's not a good feeling to have, and I feel like teachers, even officers, police officers, every day they go out here, they're dealing with somebody who's killing somebody, they're coming to scenes where people are shot or, hit by a car, anything. They need mental health days. That's a lot. That's trauma on the officer. That's their mindset. How do you think they go to sleep at night? Some of them probably don't sleep at night because of what they do at work. As well as teachers, I couldn't sleep well that night I found out my student died. I just seen him the day before, that Friday, and he died over the weekend, So mental health is definitely something that is needed in the school system. I feel like maybe like a day or something that, we can have at least a year in the school year, everybody have a mental health day, so that, we have time to process these feelings and these emotions that's going on in the school system today. Also, he piggybacked on you saying, the principals and things, people being scared. I feel like the principal and the higher ups are scared of the students. I feel like that's what's tearing the school system down. Not scared to say something, scared to tell the student, no, that's not right, because you're scared of their reaction or how they're going to react to you, how they're going to come back at you. Because, I see it every day. Just like, no, just let him go ahead and do what he's going to do, because they don't want to say nothing to him because they're scared the student might, do something crazy. Or, you might say something to the student that messed them out, and that's how we get these school shootings, because some teachers, sometimes we just say stuff and not really think about how we affect the student when we say it. And then, you come today and you wonder why the school got shut up the next day. And it's not always the students that do it. Sometimes it's the teachers, it's the influence of the others, it's the influence of the superiors, counselors having favoritism, showing the student more than they would show this student, things like that, or penalizing the student but not penalizing this student, or giving this student suspension but not suspending this student off of whose student they like best. That too. Favoritism in the school system, that's big. I see it every day. That has to change. That stuff affects students as well as me as a teacher, and I don't like seeing it in the school system. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, no, thank you so much.
Bill, I'd like to chime in if I could. One of the things that when I was in the streets running the game, the mentality is different now. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're losing. The battle is that we're using old methodology to try to transform and change the system where we're not communicating effectively the way they communicate. We got to get people that are boots on the ground, that can speak their language and be able to build trust with them, because you couldn't talk to me 40 years ago if I didn't know you and you approach me in the wrong way. That's disrespect. Mm-hmm. And disrespect in the street is dealt with. Same thing is happening now. It's nothing new. We got to deal with the fact that the mentality of our kids now, they don't care about old heads like me. They don't care about people like you. What they're saying is that your time is past. So we got to find a new way of breaking into their mindset. Not what we think is right, but what do they think is right, to be able to reach them.
Right.
So who are these? Who would the boots on the ground be? More officers, or is it more counselors? Is it more young people who are trained? Who would they be?
It's going to take a combination of all that. Mm-hmm. But first of all, you got to, again, find somebody that they can relate to. I was looking at some things on IG. I stay on IG. It's because, parents, you need to stay on IG. It's how you learn stuff. There's a different language out here. If you don't understand the language, you're not looking at the videos, you're going to be lost in the sauce. They can be talking in front of you and you not know what's going on. So I'm saying right now, we need some teams that we can, again, identify that will be helpful in understanding the language. We need counselors, we need people, we need the entire community working together to say, what do our youth need? It's time to start asking them instead of asking us.
Yeah. Very good point. And that is one thing. We did have a call to teens. We got a couple of responses, but not many. So it's going to take courage as well to add them and bring them to the table. So very good point. John Burkett, we're going to go to you now with another question, please.
Yep, so I'm standing with Reverend Dandridge. He's joining us from across the river in Chesterfield County. Sir, thank you for joining us. What's your question?
Well, my question is, I'm a law-abiding citizen, correct? Okay. I can purchase one weapon a month for 12 months, 30 days in between. I can then take that weapon and sell it to a private seller, which stipulates a straw purchase. That straw purchaser can now sell that weapon to anyone in the city. That's how one-way weapons can get on the street illegally. So my question is, shouldn't there be a registration, an annual registration, to say that those 12 weapons that I purchased, I still own them, like we do in DMV for your car? You have to prove that you have insurance. You have to prove that you still have the car. So why shouldn't we have to prove that we still have the weapon before it gets transferred in an illegal process? So that question goes out to Ms. McKeachin and the gentleman at ATF, because I think it's a little bit in their background.
We don't have any members of the General Assembly here, but yes, why don't we start with you, CA McKeachin.
So what I would say is that as much as we all feel, and people have said that they want guns off the street, you all are well aware that the United States Supreme Court and the Virginia General Assembly have said that everyone is entitled to possess a firearm, that it is difficult for states to restrict those firearms, that a lot of state restrictions would be unconstitutional. And to Reverend Dandridge's point, any changes in how firearms are bought, purchased, sold, distributed are at the General Assembly level. It is not something that City Council can change. It is not something that an individual can change. That is up to the General Assembly. As you all know, November is in a few months, and all 140 seats in the General Assembly, the entire Senate and the entire House of Delegates, are up for vote, up for election. So I would suggest strongly that if you care about the gun violence issue and you care about what the gun laws are in the Commonwealth of Virginia, that you go online, find out what your state representative feels about gun laws, and it's on their website, and then you decide who you're going to support. But a change in gun laws starts with the General Assembly.
So firearms registration, to transfer a firearm from an FFL, that firearm, there's no registration. That's just an FFL form that's filled out and is kept in ATF custody, and we can then go back and look and determine who the purchaser was, but it's not digitized, I don't believe, at this point. It wasn't when I left, at least. So a common sense, potential for a common sense legislation to address that might be that there would have to, any transaction that would have to take place after that initial transaction would also either have to go through an FFL, which then it would then be registered with FFL, if you will, or some other type of paperwork that would track the possession of that firearm to the next owner. And when they passed the one gun a month law back in 1993, I'm from the country, and most of my buddies back then and still today hunt and fish and do those types of things, and they all own multiple firearms. And I was concerned a little bit about that one gun a month law. And so I called those guys up and I asked them about it, and they were like, I don't buy more than one gun a month. So it didn't really have an impact on most legal gun owners. And if you were a collector or for some other reason you needed to purchase multiple guns as an investment or something like that, there was an avenue for you to do that through state police. So that may be a common sense solution to that, to address that issue. Because I don't think it would have that significant of an impact on legal gun owners transferring their weapons to other legal gun owners.
So I have a question.
All right. We're gonna.
And I know I'm on the panel, but I do have a question about that, because my question is, in regard to what he was saying, and you buy one gun a month for 12 months, and I decide at 6 months I want to take 6 of those guns and transfer them over and sell them to somebody else. Now me, the individual that purchased those guns, I have no responsibility for the 6 guns that I'm deciding to sell. But if the laws changed and made an individual responsible for the guns that they purchased, and you track them through the lifetime of that gun, you can't stop it when they throw it in the river. But if it ends up somewhere, you, the person who bought that gun and went out and sold it to somebody else, could be held accountable for the murder of that person that was killed when you purchased a gun and sold it to somebody else illegally. And I think that's one of the things that should happen, is when you go out and you buy a gun, you become responsible for that gun. Mr. Willis, you and I had a conversation right after my daughter was killed. I do believe you have a good idea. If they figure out how to put serial numbers that attach the gun to the bullets and relate those and hold these people accountable who go out here and buy them and give them to everybody else, or put them in a place where other people can get them, it's gonna make a difference. And I don't understand why in 2023, we have so many breakdowns in technology. When we talk about Instagram and Facebook, and we have all these other means to track and travel and do so much other stuff, how come we can't figure out how to track all these things like this FFL? I don't know what that is. I'm gonna learn about it, but how come we don't know that? You know, I just learned from off of the TV the other day that, in talking to my detective, that when they do, what do you call it, the ballistic comparisons, right? They're in zones, right? If I'm a killer, I'm not gonna stay in zone A, zone B, zone D, whatever. I'm gonna go wherever I wanna go. I'm gonna move that gun wherever I need to move it. So why do we only check in certain areas when we're holding accountabilities of people who commit crimes? Why don't we just automatically look everywhere? Because I'm a killer, right? I'm not staying in Richmond. I'm not gonna stay in Richmond. I'm not gonna keep that gun in Richmond. I'm gonna go wherever I wanna go to get rid of it. And it could be used in any other crime. So why are there so many pieces of red tape in trying to help make a difference in society? We don't do it for Instagram, we don't do it for Facebook, we don't do it for Twitter. We need to do it for lives.
Yes, I agree. All right.
Yeah, and that's what tonight is all about, hearing these ideas, these solutions from communities, people that are impacted. One way that we are doing that is online. So Reba, I know that you are listening to the voice of people listening and watching online. What questions are you getting?
We are getting a lot of questions right now. We have about 140 people streaming with us right now. And the big things, the 2 takeaways from this, people want to know about gangs. How do we address the gang situation in our city, in our community, not just the city, but also they want to know about the programs. Ramon Jones asked, the city has taken away things that our youth could be involved in, such as recreation and parks. Also mentioned the PAL program. What happened to the funding for these programs? At least we knew where our kids were. Today, I'm more afraid of the kids than adults. Also, parents really do need to be aware of what their kids are involved in. And he mentioned the PAL program, also in the streaming here, Hear Risk coming up a lot, and that is the Richmonders involved to strengthen our communities. Anyone want to address some of the programs that maybe we have lost in our community or city?
Definitely. I think we've lost like Boys and Girls Clubs. I grew up with a Boys and Girls Club. I don't know, but that definitely took a good effect on me. It kept me out the streets. It kept me wanting to go there. Also, after school programs, I don't know where that went either. After school programs, I used to get off of school and go straight to after school program and learn more. I'm learning what I just learned in school, or maybe even something different, or even something better. Something like that. Maybe parents having stuff lined up for your child. When your child got out of school, he need to go straight to the after school program. And when he get out of that, maybe you need to put him in a sport or something. You know, just keep them busy. That time they have to think or to be with their friends, to have that influence is what our kids, that's what's making our kids go join a gang or go buy a gun because they think it's cool because their friends are doing it. So as a parent, you know, we all, I'm not a parent, but I know you try to do your best to make your child the best you can. You cannot stop your child from going out here wanting to buy a gun. You can't stop your child from going out here wanting to be a part of a gang. You could be the best mom, best dad in the world, best family, married 20 years. Give your child everything they want. Send them to college full ride. I've seen it. I've seen VCU students. It doesn't matter. It's all about influence to me. And you can't stop that.
Superintendent, you could probably quantify those after-school programs?
Yes,
that have been cut?
I did want to clarify, and I do want to give Mayor Stoney credit. He has invested quite a bit in after-school programs. There's an organization called Next Up, which is sort of a convener of after-school programs. That's in all of our middle schools. We have Parks and Rec and YMCA after school at all of our elementary schools. There's a beautiful new Boys and Girls club in the East End. So I actually do think the city has stepped up on that front. I think the challenge is we just need more, and the resources are limited. But I do think we have a lot of leaders in the city who have been paying attention to this issue. It's just that the need is so great.
And can you quantify the participation level and what the target level might be? I mean, is it 10% of kids taking part and you'd love to have 30, or what are we talking about?
I don't want to quote numbers and get it wrong, but it is a significant chunk of our kids who are attending after school programs, and I know our families are incredibly grateful for that. But you know, if you are working 3 minimum wage jobs to put food on the table and pay your rent, it may mean that you're not home from 7 p.m. to midnight. So, you know, in that gap, it's really hard for families. And so after school programs are great, but it really does take, it's trite, but the village, right? If I got to work that minimum wage job, then maybe a neighbor can help watch my kids, or maybe a family member can pitch in, and it's that sort of fabric that wraps around our kids that is so critical. But that fabric is tearing because so many people don't have jobs or can't actually pay rent in Richmond, or can't get to a job because the bus route doesn't come close enough to where they live. And so it's why investing in all of those other pieces, those threads of the fabric are so important.
Right. And one thing I'd just like to say is there's always particularly for young men, but all of our young people need something to strive for, need something to focus upon that's positive. So, just tonight we have the RBA League for Safer Streets, which is a great program with basketball at the Liberation Church. It started Tuesday. They're playing right now. On Fridays and Saturdays, as part of our Operation Safe Summer, we have open gyms at the Gill Center and George Wythe. So Parks and Rec is managing that. The Richmond Police Department is supporting with security for that. So those are just some of the options. But as Superintendent Camera says, the need is incredible.
I'd love to make a comment on this, and it's really around the economic prosperity piece that we talk about in our community. I was recently in Kansas City on a chamber visit, and Kansas City built a $1.5 billion airport. And as part of that construction, they identified a process where the general contractor had to identify vendors who were community-based vendors to do things like asphalt for the airport. In addition to that, it provided an opportunity for those vendors to employ people and train people to do that kind of work. A simple thing like that, making that kind of investment, creates jobs for people such that the desire to go out and do something bad is reduced. In addition to that, we are planning several economic development projects across our community. And there's a great opportunity that we have to say, if you're going to build a $500 million project or $1 billion project, you have to commit to support a school for 3 years and to help pay some of the salaries of those teachers for 3 years. You get a tax break for that economic development project, so you should make an investment in our community. I think we have to think differently about the way we think about this problem. And if we don't address that economic divide in our community, that hope that you talk about will never be there.
That's right.
We're going to move on to the next question, and we have formed a line, so that is wonderful, community voice here. So we're going to probably limit some of the panel interaction just so that we can get to all of our questions tonight. Go ahead, John.
So Janine, one of the topics we discuss, our viewers wanted us to discuss, is mental health, and with me is Sherry Clark. She has a comment about mental health.
Yes, my comment is that I recently worked at registering patients through ER. I had a few people that come in with mental issues. They come in through the ER, they get treated, and they get released right back into the street. So they're not getting any help. That's one issue that I see. The second issue is that you have someone that's have committed a crime that may be on drugs or something, they get more time than somebody that's killing someone. They may get 10 or 15 years for a robbery, but murder, they get a 5-year sentence. What are we going to do about that? That's the issue I'm having and that I'm seeing. Because I am the niece, my aunt, I'm the aunt of Demetra Simmons that was murdered back in May. So we have a couple issues going on mentally and not knowing who murdered my niece. Still out there, we're still wondering, we're still thinking every day. We have we have unanswered questions, and that we're still looking for some answers for.
Our hurting family. C.A. McKeechin, is that, it seems to be other discrepancies in some sentencing issue?
So the short answer is yes, and that depends on a lot of different factors, right? So let me take the first part of this lady's question or comment first, which is if somebody is in a school, in a hospital, out in public and seems to be having mental health issues or a mental health crisis, unless they are a danger to themselves or others, or unless there is enough evidence to get a temporary detention order, a TDO, or an emergency order, or unless they actually commit a crime in the course of their having a mental health issue, they assault someone, they damage property, they do something violent, that's when the law is able to step in and offer some type of support and service so that they're not just, quote, released to the street. But because this is America, and because everybody who is over the age of 18 is entitled to live their life the way they want to, unless they break a law or unless they are dangerous to themselves or other people, then you will see that happen. So that's my response to the first part of your comment. As to the second part, where someone gets more time for a robbery than for a homicide, or more time for a burglary than an aggravated malicious wounding, that depends on a host of circumstances. It depends on the person's criminal record. It depends on whether there's a jury trial or a bench trial. It depends on what the facts are in the individual case. It depends on whether or not there's a plea agreement. It depends on how good all the evidence is in those cases. So there's never an apple-to-apple correlation, because the good thing about the criminal justice system is that you are supposed to look at every case individually and arrive at a disposition that is just and fair, and that may not look apples to apples. It may be apples to oranges.
That's hard when you're...
John, do you have another question?
Yeah, we're with Bridget Whitaker. She's from the Northside downtown area. Ms. Whitaker.
Correct. My question is, when are we going to hold the organizations responsible for creating the scenarios that we are now experiencing in our city First of all, I want to bring notice to the fact that we have a lot of empty seats in here. I'm going to keep it real. My heart is breaking that we didn't have as much turnout as I had anticipated, and it breaks even more because the people that really need to be here are not, and you know who you are. So let's talk about the organizations and the scenario and environments that have been created here in Richmond, and the police, I'm sure, can chime in on this. We have had several, if not hundreds, of organizations pop up in the name of mental health care for our community and citizens, some of which have run off with the funding, have left many, many families without proper resources, housing, proper care, most of which are getting ready to be released into the streets, so you can look for your homeless numbers to go up. We have determined here that our resources in Richmond cannot and will not accommodate the need that has been created here since COVID. We've never recovered from COVID. After COVID, we had an influx of inmates released early from our Richmond City General District Courts, I believe. That was last year this time. Thousands hit the street with no resources, nowhere to go, no housing, no jobs, no organizations put in place to accommodate the simple need of obtaining ID. If you don't have ID, you can't get resources, you can't get a job. So your crime is going to go up. We are not taking care of our families, our mothers, our fathers are stressed out emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically. So what you think you're going to get from their children? Crime, despair, anxiety, all of which you are experiencing in your schools and in your communities. Until we get serious about fixing our citizens, move away from all this redevelopment and all this hype that we're putting on, all of these amphitheaters and casinos. I'm all about growth, don't get it wrong. I'm all about timing as well. We have not properly taken care of our citizens here. Our homeless numbers have doubled, if not tripled, and I stand behind Jason. He sees the outcome of what we are experiencing. When I say we, I work with a few nonprofits, particularly Blessing Warriors of RVA. We are boots on the ground. We are feeding people. Rhonda Sneed, I hope you're watching. She is an angel, and had it not been for her, you would have heard more about the deaths of homeless people in our streets. It's been kept quiet, but there's been quite a few. So I'm going to wrap this up. When are we going to start holding these organizations accountable for profiting off of our citizens? We are not collateral damage. They are running off with the resources, and rarely are the monies touching the ground and our children receiving the services that they deserve.
Thank you, Ms. Whitaker.
So is there someone that could address that? I mean, it sounds like we're talking about, if I've heard correctly, nonprofits that were set up to collect certain funds, making the promises of mental health care or others. I'm sorry, yeah.
Of Richmond. Failed them. That's why they're not here. They're cowards watching behind the camera. And you know who you are. Until you take care of your citizens, nothing else is going to prosper here.
Anybody want
I'm not sure we have someone on the panel that could address that, so we'll take note of that and try to find an answer. John? Yes, please, John.
All right, we got Ms. Coles from Henrico County.
Hi, thank you. I just want to say I'm glad that we are having this town hall today. What I actually wanted to, I want to start off with, when we talk about boots on the ground, and Mr. Sherman, you literally took everything on my sheet out of my mouth. And when we're talking about boots on the ground, I'm a 44 decades of civil rights and grassroots. I have not only just worked here in Central Virginia, but I've worked all over this entire state. And what you said is exactly correct. And what we're going to understand is that these kids and the people that's out here today, we're going to have to do something different. Mr. Sherman, the gentleman next to you, the teacher, and the parents that have lost loved ones, these are the people that you need to get on the stage, because you need to get people that are approachable, that people that, and just as Mr. Sherman said, that that the community is going to actually listen to, that they can relate to. Because unfortunately, everybody's not going to be relatable, not anymore. And we have so much crime going on around us. I'm in Henrico. It's the same. We have so much crime going on around us. And until we get people back in a town hall like this is a great idea. This is a start. But we got to have people that, I know I listened to the mom that lost her daughter, and it's heartbreaking. But see, someone like her, Mr. Sherman, the gentleman here, I can take the teacher. I can take what you have back, what you just said. I can take just what you said back to the community and share it. If you have, they're just like, I'm heartbroken as well that where's the children? Where are the parents? See, if you have those people on stage, you can have a full house. I was a PTA president for Rich Neck Elementary, where you had that shooting with the teacher in Rich Neck. I was a PTA president for 4 years there. Now, I was a PTA president in the early 2000s. However, the same still. In my PTA meetings, because the children was already, the parents and the children was involved in the PTA, we had standing room only, attendance. But you're not going to be able to do that when you have the same people that you see in the media every time you turn around, and the deaf ear is already there. Because I already know whose turns a deaf ear. I already know what you're going to say. It's not working. You're going to have to make some changes, and honestly, that change, I see a lot that can be done that we can take away from tonight. I certainly want to thank everyone that's here, and my heart goes out to those that have lost loved ones. And being on the ground and working in the capacity on a national platform that I've worked, and I'm gonna tell you, I deal with families every day. We have a family, we just solved a case in Brunswick, in Emporia, where a young lady died of an overdose 4 years ago. Her family been fighting for 4 years. But guess what we just learned? And we got the FBI back on it. The grandparents just got the letter that it went back to the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. I'm not going to go into much more of the investigation, but it's a lot of work that's involved as an advocate. And it's a lot of hard work that's involved as an advocate. But the work that we do on the ground, believe it or not, we help police, Commonwealth Attorney's Office, and everybody else, whether they want to realize, in families. Our focus is the families, is getting justice, as Mother said, is getting justice for these families. And what we're going to have to do is make a change and making sure that all these families get addressed. It does start in the home, but we got to make sure that our families are getting the need that they need, and our children are being taken care of. I listened to that teacher. She's exactly right about what's going on in the schools, but we definitely got to do a better job. And I hope that change is starting today. Thank you.
So much.
Thank you, Ms. Coles.
Yeah. Thank you for that comment. So we tried really hard to have a diverse panel, and thank you for recognizing that. It was harder, as I mentioned before, to get teenagers to the table, but I do want to give Thank you to Shimei, a mom, and her daughter, her teenager Destiny, for being a part of our conversation and being willing and being here. So, Shimei lost her son. He was 13. And to suicide. And so she stepped up along with her daughter to be a part of this conversation. And you're absolutely right. We have to hear more of the stories from those community members as well. We do hope to have another town hall like this in Petersburg, in Chesterfield, maybe Henrico, so that we can do a better job of that as well. We're going to go to Reba now. I think you have some questions from the stream.
We're getting a lot of questions about the family, where it starts in the home. This question is from Patsy Hathaway, and she asks, the school system can play an important part in community violence. Counselors get to see family situations firsthand. So I believe this question is for Superintendent Cameras. What can the schools do, the counselors, the administrators?
Schools can and do a lot. We have incredibly dedicated teachers, counselors, social workers. They really are the largest social service agency in a city. People don't realize that, but a school system is the largest, obviously, education system, social service system, food system, transportation system. I share that to say schools do a lot, but they can't do everything. They're typically receiving what is already happening at home and in the communities, and we try very hard, and I think are largely successful in helping kids process those things, but there's just not enough people. You have counselors who are serving 300 children. You have social workers that have a caseload of 200 families, and each family has a myriad of issues. And so, again, schools absolutely have a critical role to play, and I'm incredibly proud of what our educators in Richmond, and I know in Henrico and Chesterfield, Petersburg, everyone, but it's not enough. Folks are stretched really thin, and as our teacher noted, our mental health staff is really traumatized too. We have some of them here from RPS tonight, and every time an incident happens, they're out there. And that has a heavy toll on the adults, which is why across the Commonwealth and across the country, we're seeing teachers leaving the field. We're seeing mental health professionals leave the field. And so it is this vicious cycle. So the kids need help and the adults need help.
I agree. I want to piggyback on it. I do agree what he said. I feel, I'm sorry, my words got mixed up for a second. At Benford, just being there, we had a counselor, then they quit. Then we didn't have a counselor for a little bit. Then we had somebody who stepped up to be a counselor, but who's not a counselor. So what I was going to say is, as teachers or anybody in the school system, we do what we can, our best, to be there for the students. But you can't force every teacher to want to, not every teacher's gonna want to do that. It's only some teachers. And the teachers that do it, we definitely put our best foot forward to make sure we do what we can to make the students have somebody to listen to, know they have somebody there for them, who's trying to hold their hand through things, who pats them on the back when they do well, tell them they did a good job. So we have teachers quitting every day because it's too much. And we just need strong people who's willing to stick through the hard times. Like me, even though I lost a student and it made me feel sad every day, even though I go to school and I see students beating up other students, bullying, it doesn't make me want to stop. It makes me want to do more. It makes me want to be in the school system more. It makes me want to talk to the students more. Okay, well, why are you acting like that? Talk to me. Tell me. Is anything going on at home? Anything you want to tell me that you can't tell your parent? You know, things like that. So as teachers, we do step up and try to be those counselors for the students, because we know we only have one counselor in school, or we only have one security guard, maybe two sometimes. That's not good for a school who has 3 floors and has hundreds of students. Security is definitely something that's needed in the school system. And I see it every day, because you have a fight in this classroom, but a fight on the second floor and a fight on the third floor, but we only have 2 security guards, and they're both in the same classroom. What are we doing? You get what I'm saying? So it's like, as teachers, we try our best. And I don't want to say that we don't, but as teachers, we do. We put our best foot forward every day. We try. every day. Just wanted to say that.
I do want to add to that as well, because I'm a mom. Naturally, I'm a grandmother. And believe it or not, I'm a great-grandmother, right? But I've had a lot of experiences in multiple school systems. We've been in Richmond City schools, we've been in Henrico County schools, we've been in King and Queen County schools. I lived in a whole nother state when I grew up. But one of the things that I want to say that I see is we need to incorporate diversity into our school systems. We don't teach our children how to learn to live amongst each other. We just go to school and we teach them what this piece of paper said, teach them the standards of learning, right? But what about the standards of living? They have to know that everybody is not like them, but that doesn't make them different. They have to know that everybody doesn't have the same things that they have, but that doesn't make them different. They need to know that they might not go to the same places that all the other kids go, but that does not make them different. And if they understand that they're not as different as they think they are, maybe we can make some differences in the way that they think.
Jenny, can I say something very quickly? There's an underutilized segment of society, and that's people that look like me, people that have been in situations like me. I'm not asking, I know this is a General Assembly thing, but we got, Chuck and I talk about 3-tier, 4-tier students. They need somebody that they can look at and say, hey, if she can do it or he can do it, I can do it. But there's some red tape involved where if you have a felon, you can't necessarily enter the schools. These are the people that are going to be able to reach our kids because they're out in the community with them. And so if I can't enter in the school, I can't enter in the after-school program, I don't have access to. I'm not talking about violent people. I'm not talking about sexual predators. I'm talking about people that have made mistakes, and by golly, they've changed their life around. They look like this with 2 degrees, working for a 500 company. This is what transformation looks like, ladies and gentlemen. Acceptance, that's what I want you all to leave here with. Acceptance is what we need. Accept me when I'm not in my tie. Accept me when you see my tattoos. Accept me when you see me looking different with my dreadlocks. Acceptance. And that was the biggest problem I had, even when I went around the Commonwealth talking about my life in crime, was people that shook my hand when I first walked into the convention, but wouldn't shake my hand afterwards.
John, do you have another question?
Yes, I'm standing with Mr. Lundy from Richmond. I know that Colette McEachin sort of addressed this earlier with Amazon and the purchases of guns, but you had a question about ghost guns.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, and greetings to everyone. This is a lot. God's grace and mercy, from whom our blessings shall flow. First of all, I'd like to say to the police department, thank you for the work that you have to do. It's a tedious job that y'all have, okay? So first and foremost, we want to let you know that we do stand behind you, and whatever that looks like. Y'all have a heck of a job, okay? My question is, and I might have missed it, are y'all seeing any ghost guns? And if you're seeing ghost guns, what are y'all doing about that? My second question would be after-school activity buses for the pilot program. If we could start a pilot program for superintendent cameras. If you all are partnered up with Next Up, you would know the partners that's in the community. A lot of times what we're having is kids are having problems from, transportation problems from one location to the other. So if we could do a pilot program, maybe for 8 weeks to see what that looks like, if it's in your budget, bring those kids to us as well, okay? Or allow us to actually come into the schools, okay, and then have an activity bus so that we take them home. You're talking about a 2-hour period to get them to and from like we used to have back in the day. So my question, once again, is about the ghost guns, and then could we possibly have that school activity after school program?
Mr. Leonard.
So Chief, perhaps you could address the ghost guns, which are parts that are manufactured with a 3D printing press, perhaps, or bartered and traded online, and no traceable parts.
Correct. They're what are the ATF terms as privately manufactured firearms. They're not illegal in and of themselves, but there is no serial number. You can't trace them. When I talk to my colleagues around the country, chiefs of police and out west, they're saying 75, 85% of their guns that they seize as a police department are these ghost guns, because the laws are so tight, it makes sense. In Richmond and in our Commonwealth, it's easy to get real guns. Better, you know, you can buy a Glock, and like I mentioned earlier, you can get a real gun out of someone's car, or you can buy it lawfully from an FFL, or you can have someone do what's called a straw purchase, where a person goes in, picks out the gun, pays for it, passes a background check, and then hands you the gun as they walk out the door. So, you know, the biggest concern for me right now isn't the ghost guns, even though they're a problem. It's something I talk about often, and that's what's commonly referred to as a Glock switch. So these are auto sears. These are a small device that go into the back of a normal pistol and turns it into a machine gun. And I can tell you, last night we had a shooting where one of those guns was used. So, and the biggest concern with those, and when we saw our spike in non-fatal shootings last year, if you have a pistol that is a machine gun, you can't control it. So it is bouncing everywhere. So the person that you're aiming at, you might miss, but you may hit 5 other people accidentally. So those are cases that we bring to the federal government. Ms. McKeechin and I have had conversations about the possibility of making that against the law for the Commonwealth. So I think that's just common sense. Even responsible gun owners know that that's not a reasonable device to put on a pistol to make it fully automatic. So that's that answer on that question. I think there's a transportation question.
Yes. Short answer is yes. Let's connect and figure out the details.
Yeah.
All right.
It's a great answer.
Yeah.
Best answer all night.
Yes. Short and sweet.
Succinct.
All right.
You get an A+.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
So let's go over to Reba. You have a question for Facebook?
Yeah, I have a question from Dion Harris. Pay the police officers their due, then you might can have a fully staffed department. So this question, I guess, is for Chief Edwards. Are you fully staffed, and how difficult is it to get these officers and to keep them?
Well, I can tell you that we're 22% down on our sworn staffing, and that affects the entire police department at, you know, whether it's our school resource officers, our patrol officers, our detectives. So we are building back this police department. 2020 was a real challenge for us. We were relatively fully staffed in there at that time. We were in the 720. We're authorized for 755. Today I have 588. And but I'm encouraged in the sense that we just tracked our application. So of this time last year, for 6 months, from January to the end of June, we're 74% up in our police officer applications. But I'm going to take this opportunity to speak to this crowd like I do at every crowd, and I'm going to say it, you know, for those viewing at home. The Richmond Police Department's hiring heroes, and if you want to make a difference in people's lives, this is a career, and this is a police department where you can do it. And you can look at those men and women back there that have risked their lives for decades, that love this city, that want to keep our citizens safe. And I would just encourage everyone who wants to serve to check us out.
Just clarify that when you're down 2%, how many officers, what's the number that you need?
I would like to be fully staffed at 755, but I'm telling you, I don't know that we need to get to that number. We need more, certainly, but by leveraging technology, our officers are more effective and more efficient than they've ever been. So we're utilizing those cameras, license plate recognition. We're building a real-time crime center in Richmond that hopefully will be operational by the end of the year, so that the officers we do have in the field will be supported by a staff of technicians and civilians in that room, directing them to go after the bad guys. So I think that by leveraging technology, we may never need to get back to 755.
Yeah. Understaffed but optimistic, and I love that you said that you're hiring heroes.
That's right.
All right,
We need people, and you know, from all walks of life. That's what's so great about the Richmond Police Department, is that there's no one way to be a great Richmond police officer. We have all types of people from all different kind of backgrounds, but they can all serve and they can all help make our city better.
I just want to note we're hiring heroes as well.
Living proof right here.
And we have
tag along. You tag along.
and we have nothing but heroes. So wait, no, Greg McQuaid is always looking for heroes, though. That's good. So John, you got another question?
Yeah, well, Tanika Daniel from the Churchill area. She has a statement and a quick question.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tamika Daniel, as he stated. I work for a local nonprofit, Greater Richmond Scan, and I have a few statements. The first one is I was born and raised in Richmond, Virginia. I'm 37 years old. I'm a mom to 4 RPS students. My key points are policy and politics. We talk about the community and how we need to be involved, but we're up against the powers that be, the people who are in control of the laws and different things of that nature. And we want things for the community, but at the same time, the people who are tasked with having the most interactions with our children and families are the most underpaid in the city. The teachers are underpaid. The mental health workers are underpaid. And another thing, until I started working from Greater Richmond Scan, I did not know it was another side of trauma. So imagine all of the other people in our communities who do not have access to this information. Another thing, the two most prevalent things in our children's lives are home and school. Home and school. We're not collaborating because everybody's stuck in survival mode. As this gentleman stated, we write off the people who can actually help our children. I got better information and better knowledge and was able to help my own babies, but that came from me realizing that as much as a good mom I am, I couldn't do it alone. For my sons, I lived in public housing for 6 years up until 2021. The only thing I believe that saved my boys is me being able to get some positive black men around them. They need to see our black men in positive lights, and there are plenty out there, but again, because of policy and politics, they're not able to have interactions. And the last thing I want to touch on, the systems say it's created equal, but it's not. The system is set up for failure. The reason why I say this, 2 examples. I lived in public housing. When I started to do better for myself, my rent went up to $1,000 and $1,200. Why are you asking a single mom for $1,200 to live in public housing? And then I can't get assistance with food. So I'm stuck. I want to keep doing better, but every time I go up, there's no transitional programming for people who come from off public assistance who want to do better. It is literally people living in these communities that are stuck with making decisions, or do I choose to do better, or do I stay where I'm at because I know I'm guaranteed housing if I do this? Or either, last point, moms, dads who want to work. These people literally told me if I was just working, coming to them to get child care, they were going to put me on a waiting list that possibly took 2 years, and I would have to pay a percentage. But here's the kicker. When I decided to go and get on TANF, I got child care immediately. How is it that we expect our people to do so much better when the systems are stacked against them? Thank you.
Does anybody want to comment on
I just
that
want to
one?
say I agree.
And me too.
For someone who doesn't have any kids, I do think that it's hard for us also, because when we fall short too, even though we don't have any kids, our life gets hard too. We go through things just like any other person who has kids. Of course, people with kids, have a harder load. But I do think, I've been in a situation where I couldn't get no help because I don't have any dependents. That's the first thing they ask me. Do you have any dependents? No? Okay, well, we can't do nothing for you. So I do think it should be something set in place for people who does not have kids also. We deserve help too. I just want to say that.
Real quick, can we get something from Keisha from the South Side?
Yes. How you doing? My name is, can you put it up a little bit? Yeah. My name is Keisha Cummings. I'm the founder of Two Love LLC. People would probably consider me a gun violence advocate in Richmond. I don't consider myself, I don't like the word gun violence because it puts all the onus on the children and or young adults, females and males that are committing the gun violence or the act. And it takes a lot of acknowledgement as, off of us as individuals and as society. And so I have lost probably 40 young men and women to gun violence in terms of them being killed or murdered. And I've lost probably just that much in terms of them committing violent acts. And so I serve both sides. And so I'm glad that you spoke, Ms. Daniels, because at the end of the day, we have to acknowledge that we are all working in a system that is not working for us as people. And I didn't really know what to talk about, but you said that you wanted a voice here, so I decided to try to be that voice that is not here, and to see what I would say if I was that voice. And if I was that voice, I would say that voice, that unheard voice, is why did Ms. Keisha get a phone call from Parks and Recreation after I was finally letting Martin Luther King, thank you, Mr. Cameras, in an after-school program. We talk about after-school programs, and Commonwealth Attorney Colette McKeachin said that it is juveniles and the chief of police that are committing the crimes. These are not 10-year-olds, so I would assume that the average age would be between 14 and 18. So if I was somebody, I would want to know from Mosby Court, why did Ms. Keisha get a phone call from Parks and Rec saying that the police made the decision to close Martin Luther King Gym, a place where I could finally breathe and go and play basketball. It was open for 8 weeks. It was almost 100 kids that came into there, and as soon as school stopped, when the summertime came, it was closed. And when I asked Parks and Rec why it was closed, they told me that they had transferred it from the Fairfield Court, which has nothing to do with Mosby babies or Creighton babies or Wickham babies. And they also told me that they had it at George Wythe, which has absolutely nothing to do with Hillside babies or the babies in San Susie, or you might say Southwood. And so when I bring these statistics up, I just want stuff to be brought up to acknowledge it, so that we can understand it and so that we can move forward together as a people with solutions. If I lived in public housing, I would say, why in the last 3 years has RHA spent $3.1 million on surveillance, but no recreation centers open where I live at? Why don't I have programs for my mother to go in here and fill out a job application, or for some mental health counseling for the Broken Men Foundation to come inside of Fairfield Court and Wickham Court and to treat me, or come into Hillside, or come into San Susie or Southwood, what they call it now, and treat me? That's what I would want to know. I would want to know, how could you possibly, I know the grant says public safety, but prevention is public safety. I would want to know how the Calhoun Center has been closed for 12 years, but yet the city opened it to let Kevin Durant film a movie there. But these babies didn't have a pool. It's an Olympic-sized swimming pool in Gilpin Court in the Calhoun Center. If you guys do not know, it is not a small pool. It is a beautiful pool that can be used for competitive swimming. And I want it to be open before the city takes over it next year and starts to tear it down for other people to move in. I would want to know why I live in Hillside and I haven't had a recreation center open to me in years, where we have a program in Southside, where we have so many grassroots people that are coming out there day in that you guys never see, because you know what? They're never going to be called on stage. They are in the trenches. A lot of them are black men that have come home and they want to get back and serve their community. But like Mr. Bowling said, they don't qualify because there's too much red tape. You have a lot of black men and Hispanic men that want to come into RPS and have groups with these young people, but they can't because it's a lot of red tape. And again, I'm saying this so that we can change some things. If I was somebody and I had to speak up, I would want to know, the chief said that in 2021 we had the most violent crime. The basketball courts are still not up in Wickham Court. They still do not have nuts up. It is no nuts on Accommodation Street. Sorry, Fairfield, I don't know. Oh, they got the gym over there in Fairfield. There are no nets. It does not cost that much to put a net up. During the pandemic, like Mr. Cameron said, $173 million additional dollars came in for funding. $60 million went to the ESL community. I don't know to the Hispanic population or the Latinx population whether or not y'all saw it hit the community. I just know I never saw it hit the community in the hood. So I know what it say on paper, but I don't know. I know I never saw it. And I know 20 of it was supposed to be allocated for what that sister said, which is social emotional learning. We have to take the O out. Everybody is focused on the SOL. We have to focus on humanity first. Because when we focus on humanity and what is going on with these kids and what is going on with people out here, that is what's going to stop the gun violence, okay? Because you can have a gun all day long. I can have a gun there all day long. I'm not going to pick it up. It is something that's going on inside a person to make them want to play God and take someone else's life. That's what we have to face, and we all, including myself, have to take acknowledgement on the part that we play, because we can't continue to look like Colette said. It is election time coming up. It's 140 seats coming up. This is an election that never happened. And next year, the mayoral election is going to come up, and city council election is going to come up, and school board election is going to come up. So we have to stop relying on them to do what is working for them clearly. It's not working for us. It's not working for the people. And when I say them, I'm not talking about them individually. I'm just talking about the system, because they are also part of a system as well that may not be working for them. As far as the police, it has to go both ways. It has to go both ways. The community aspect has to go both ways. I'm trying to bridge different things. I was in Hillside the other day checking on my students, and I saw somebody come, and the lady just stared. So I walk over, I said, "How you doing? Everything all right?" She giving me the same look that she giving the kids. So I'm like, dang, how would she look at them if I wasn't here? I'm like, well, you're staring. She's like, yeah. I'm like, you just gonna sit here and stare? She like, yeah. But who are you to do that? That's what Mr. Bowling is saying. Would you do that to Mr. Cameron? You wouldn't. So we gotta acknowledge that. And so, okay. I'm sorry. What is the vulnerable?
Somebody more behind you.
60 vulnerable communities. I just wanted to, I'm sorry, you guys. It's a lot that I had to say. I wanted to be that voice. That voice is not heard. Of course, that voice is not going to come to the police station. So we just have to acknowledge that we have to do stuff in an unorthodox way, a different way. And I appreciate each and every one of you guys for coming here and lending your voice and trying to come up with a solution. And thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We're going to pause for just a minute to get to Reba, because I know, Reba, you've got a bunch of questions over there.
Yeah, I have two questions. Well, one question from two people, Joyce Foster and Jenny Trovinger. I hope I said that correctly. She is a semi-retired teacher. They are both inspired by watching this town hall today, and they want to get involved. And how do you do that? Where do they begin? And they want to come up with action plans. So we talked about the problems here tonight. What's the solution, and how do individuals get involved?
That's a great question. Superintendent, is that something you can address? I mean, do outside people, what can they do to help the schools? Or as Cruz Sherman has said, you know, if that box is checked and they still have the box on the forms, I understand, they can't get into the school. But how can someone reach out and help?
So the easiest way to reach out is just to email me. So my email is jcamras@rvaschools.net. Truly, send me an email and I can connect you. We have a whole partnerships team for volunteers and organizations who want to help. And we can plug you in where you're needed the most. Oftentimes we find that there's a lot of people who want to help, but if we're not set up to receive the help, folks end up getting frustrated and then they walk away, understandably. So we try to be very intentional when somebody reaches out. Maybe they want to mentor, maybe they want to help with reading, maybe they want to help after school, whatever the case may be. Shoot me an email and I'm glad to connect you to the right folks. And then I would say, you can also help outside of school. If you have a neighbor in need, help them out. If they need help with childcare, if they need help, if they're older and they need help taking care of their house or their property, whatever it is, the more we help each other, the more likely it is folks are going to be able to, as Robert said, not just survive, but thrive. And that's going to be the antidote to so much of what we're dealing with.
And Robert, can people help you out? How can they help with mental health for children?
Sure. In the same way, you could call us, and I'll give you my email, arabowling@childsavers.org, and we'll refer you to the right place. And I've got to put this plug in. Sorry, we are a nonprofit organization, so if you want to contribute to us, go to childsavers.org.
All right. Thank you.
John?
We got a question by Larry Williford here from the north side.
Hey, my name's Larry Williford again, and I'm come to you as a father first, as a coach, ex-coach, as a member of the neighborhood, and I just wanted to ask police chief, and I hope you get that job, that why haven't Richmond grasped GVI, group violence intervention, as a strategy to help solve some of the gun violence in the area? I know there's other programs, other things that we're doing with youth, a lot of the kids and younger people, which is great, and we need that. I've also worked in alternative ed, worked at Dooley School. I retired from the Georgetown School in Hanover County, and I've worked in juvenile detention, so I know what we need with the kids. And I taught conflict resolution, character education, trying to deal with a lot of our kids, our youth, and trying to teach them how to deal with their anger, how to handle conflicts. And so I know those kind of programs are great. But I also know that the people who are committing gun violence in our city, it's not our youth. It's I think there's around the age of, Chief, you can help me with that. I was told that it's not always all of the youth who are committing these crimes of gun violence. What is that age span between the age of what?
Do you have a sense of the average age of the perpetrators?
It's mid-20s, and when we look at our victims, it's the same. So I think
it's not our youth. It's not the young kids.
Some of the most egregious use of violence is our youth, because they're not making rational decisions. They may be spun up on something else. But we have, when we break down our murders for the year, most of them are in disputes. So it's not, like I said before, it's not like the drug corners that we used to deal with. But we also have a lot of domestic murders. So we have individuals who are engaged in a relationship and it ends in tragedy.
Yeah.
So,
and that's what I understand. And there's a small percentage of people committing gun violence, and there's a strategy that GVI, Group Violence Intervention, and has been used in other cities. Even in Hopewell has adopted it. How come the city of Richmond won't take on that strategy as one of their interventions?
well, I think what I can say is that we're doing some of the same things. So nobody thinks that the police are the sole solution to this. We're a symptom. We're a Band-Aid at the end of the cycle, but there's so many private organizations that are already working towards that. And, you know, so I am familiar with GVI, but when we talk about some of those tactics and techniques, we're just focused on what we're doing right now. So I know that there's a company. Are you part of RISC?
I am.
Yep. So there's a company that's approached RISC that is talking about this program, and it is going to other locations. Richmond's already part of the National Public Safety Partnership. That's a federal program that we adopted in 2021, where we are bringing in all kinds of experts to assess what we can do and how we can do it better. So, but I'm open to all of the above. taking all the tools in our toolbox. So if there's tactics you want to use, we can certainly collaborate. But I can just say that there's so many things that are going beyond what we're doing as an enforcement strategy. There's all kind of programs that the city's engaged in that we've been doing for years, and I think that, you know, while we're here talking about it, we're doing this forum. Nobody realizes we're 8% down in violent crime year over year over that time. That we're 25% down in non-fatal shootings. That we had 33 murders this time last year, and we're at 37, which is an increase, but it's not the shocking increase we saw in 2021. So I think the plan that we're having is having an effect, and what I need to do is continue to work towards that and partner with anyone who's willing to partner with us. We'll do that.
I just don't want us to try to reinvent the wheel when there's a strategy that's already been used and been proven, that we use that also.
Yes, sir.
We got 3 more questions, guys, and then try to wrap it up over here. So, ma'am, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a very quick question. We've talked multiple times about the laws needing to change or how things are done. So my question is, what are each of you going to do to educate yourself on the candidates that are going to be voted for, and who are you going to encourage to vote? It is so important. We tend to say, my vote doesn't matter, but collectively, our votes matter, and we need to make certain that we get people in the General Assembly who share the same beliefs that we do and are willing to listen to the solutions. And locking people up and locking them up longer is not the answer. We need to be focusing on our humanity and helping one another, and we need to make certain that people are educated and that they get out and vote and hopefully change. I was reading, I followed the legislation, and there were 4,400 laws introduced or something outrageous like that. It's absurd to think that the General Assembly has got that many laws. And I'm going to get off my soapbox, but my question is, what are you going to do to encourage everybody in your sphere to get out and vote and educate themselves on the candidates?
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Maureen.
Yeah, and we heard C.A. McEachin mention that earlier, that in fact this is an election year in Virginia. All 100 delegate seats are up, as well as the 40 Senate seats.
Hi, yes, I'm Kendra Simmons. I'm Demetrius Simmons' sister that we lost back in May to gun violence. I just want to kind of piggyback off of what the lady just said, and also the guy up here. I'm very proud of you for turning your life around. That's one thing I want to kind of focus on, is when someone does a crime, because everyone makes wrong choices, and you go to these, you're getting incarcerated. What type of programs do we have to kind of help rehabilitate some of the role models that we need, that Mike can say, if they did it, then I can do it too, and kind of start that early? Like, what type of rehabilitation do we have other than locking them up and they're sitting around playing cards or whatever? Do we have something to get them, you know, going back into the real world? Because things have changed now and this time and age. So I just wanted to know, what type of programs do you guys work directly with the inmates that are going to be released, and how do we rehabilitate them to come out on the street to be role models like the guy here that I'm very proud of?
Thank you, Kendra.
Bruce, is that something you can talk about, or would it be the chief? Who could address that?
You want to?
I want the real talk, because you said you said it's going to be unvarnished.
Actually, there are a lot of organizations that I talk with on a day-to-day basis. I've been talking with Commonwealth Attorney McEachin, school board, the chief, everybody that will listen. You know, I'm not trying to recreate the wheel. What I'm saying is, and I talked to Colette about this, is that there's a thing that a judge told me one time. He said, how many bites at the apple do you get? And what he was saying, in essence, you get only a few. And so we need to develop programs where people like myself are given a second bite at the apple, but they also have to pay it forward too. Meaning that when they get that second chance or get that opportunity, that we hold them in a group that they'll go back out here and teach others, reach others, and like I said, have that accountability and show them what life can look like if you decide to make a change here first. because that's where the change comes from, is in the mind. You got to want to do right. So, Chief, I'm not going to steal your thunder, but there are programs out here. We just got to get together and work together. We got too many silos, and all the silos are not working together. I said it. We're not working together. Everybody want to protect their little piece of the pie. We got to stop that and start putting the pie together if we're going to reach, because the kids looking at us. They said, y'all can't even get it together. How you expect for us to get it together when y'all are fragmented and fighting among yourselves? I'm done.
So, and I do also want to comment on that, because the lady that was talking about the voting, that's one of the things that I've been talking to not just other adults about, but the children about, because we need to teach the children what their purpose is in voting, and so that they come up and prepare, right? So I did take some notes, and it kind of piggybacks off of what my daughter said and what this gentleman here is saying, quite a few other people here. But 3 points that I want to make. I think I agree we need structured second chances. And when I say that, I mean that someone has gone out and they've done some things and they want to change their lives, but they might not know how to come back into the community to make a difference to someone else. But if that training is put in place for them when they are incarcerated or on their way homes, then they'll know how to come out and be of service to other people within the communities. But we, our leaders, are responsible for making sure that those types of things that happen. We don't just put people in place and leave them there when they're not doing the job that they're supposed to be doing. You just keep voting them in or just letting them slide in. You move them out.
Yes, ma'am. That's right.
You move them out, and you start making a difference by that vote that you have, because that power is in your hand. The next thing that I wanted to say is that, again, to our leaders, is lead responsibly. Provide a means to the end that you want to see happen. We're not providing a means to any end for anybody that's coming out and being placed on the street. You can't eat for $13 an hour. How you expect somebody else to eat for $13 an hour? The next thing I want to say is ask yourself, if you're a leader, ask yourself, what if you were hungry? What if you were jobless? What if you thought no one gave a damn about how you felt or what was going on in your life? If you're a neighbor, I ask you to think about that lady, think about me, think about him. We cry. Would you want to cry every day and not have anybody tell you what happened to your loved one, not speak up for you or your loved one? No. You don't want that to happen. So we got to make a change. To the offenders, because I'm going to speak to everybody all over, because it's not just one person or one sector that has responsibility for making this change happen. It's all of us. And to the offender, know what you want out of life and go try to get it. I heard this on a TV show earlier today. I'm not gonna say what show it was, because it probably said what in the hell she looking at that for, but they said, know what it takes to get what you want out of life, and know that it's gonna take hard work and determination to get to the end of your life without the what ifs. The what ifs are, what if I hadn't pulled that trigger? The what if is, what if I had to just listen to one person? The what if is, what if I had got up and said one thing that would have prevented somebody else from losing their life? Or what if I had made a difference in her life, meaning me? Because somebody came and spoke up to say, who did that to my child? We need a difference in all of the people. And until everybody wants to come together, like they said long time ago, it takes a village. It truly does take a village to make a difference in all of our lives. And this forum right here, it's a good forum. But if we walk up out of here and just get in your car and go home and do nothing, it's not going to matter that we were sitting here for 2 hours and had this conversation. So somebody's got to get up and do something different. Get up and do something.
John, I think we have time for one more question.
Well, with Dr. Crawford here, she got a question.
Yes, hi, how you doing? We're here about solutions. We know what the problem is, and one of the things that I specialize is in how to level up our children to be a product towards success. I am a product of what an at-risk child would be like. I grew up in Blackwell, scatter sites in the 80s. Those of you that have been around, you know about the flax boards, you know about the brown gang. I grew up in it. But the answer was the educational system. Our system is failing our children and the parents because the school system is the most powerful tool that we have in our community, the most powerful tool. If you go out there near Barn Air in the juvenile detention, the majority of the children that are housed in detention centers, they have IEPs. They're special education children. They are on a waiting list to be identified. So we need to look at the groundbreaking essence of this. As it was stated, we had wheels that were working, but our leadership of today has taken those spokes out of the wheels that were working. And I say this because when I was going through school in Richmond City Public Schools, and I'm proud to say I did, they had me in JP1. That was junior primary 1 because I could not read and write at a level that I needed to be able to go into kindergarten, because there's a certain level of language you need to have. You need to be able to speak a certain way. You need to know fundamentals when it comes to arithmetic by the time you turn 5. So I went to JP1. But the school, and I can remember Dr. John B. Carey, he was the principal of Blackwell Elementary School. He made sure that every child that went through Blackwell had character education. And you had different tiers throughout the years. He brought the parents into school, and he brought the school to the parents. We need to have, when we have our parent-teachers conferences, get out of the school, go into these community centers and have them so the parents can walk over to you, go to them. That's right. Stop trying to get parents to come somewhere that they may have about 5 kids, and they're not going to come out the house and do that. Go to the community. Yes, Mr. Cameron, you know what it is because you worked in D.C. public schools when I was an educator in D.C. public schools. We got on the school bus and we went to the community. We went to the parents. So you know what works. I don't know why you escaped it. We have so many youth that are not being properly identified. It doesn't have to be about special education. We mentioned trauma. We mentioned economics. But most importantly, I'm fighting every day just so we can have children to be properly educated according to their abilities. And that's the problem. The school is not embracing the home. Because when I was going to Blackwell and Mosby Middle School and Armstrong Kennedy High School, that's when it was a complex, we couldn't get the school teacher, the principal, or the counselor out of our house. We just didn't want them to come to the house no more. We went to school. So we need to look at the attendance rate of our children. We need to look at the academic performance. We need to also look at the disciplinary issues. Now, I want you to understand, behavior doesn't mean disruptive behavior. We need to look for challenging behaviors. Why is this child operating in isolation? Those are the main children that are doing the gun violence in the schools. They operated in isolation. You think about it. When you have these mass shootings in the schools, they operate in isolation. They avoid being in a particular class because they can't do the math. So they're always finding a way to get out of that class. They want to go to the bathroom, or they need to go to the desk or the office. Why are they avoiding and escaping? Talk to your psychologist. They should be competent enough to understand that there are 4 tiers to behavior challenges: attention getting, seeking something, avoiding something, or escaping it. So when we start looking at that, we will have our answer and bring the schools and the educational system to the parents.
Thank you, Dr. Crawford.
We go to Reba.
Reba?
Yeah, well, just wanted to mention we have questions that are still coming in. We've had over 500 comments from tonight's town hall, so I just encourage the panel and our guests to go back on our Facebook page and read some of those comments. So thank you for being here.
I want to obviously be respectful of all of your time. Thank you so much for being here. But we're going to take one more question. Oh, John, we have one more question before we wrap.
Sir? Your name and...
How you doing? My name is Al Kareem, founder of We Are Me Foundation. The reason I came here is basically because the title of this town hall, which is basically Stop the Violence. I've been involved with the community as of late. Over the last 2 years, I've been formerly incarcerated. But since I've been here, I witnessed a lot, and Mr. Bolin, I could relate to the other gentleman there. He said the key to a lot of what's going on, and it just bothered me a lot to see how off a lot of we are with the problem. The guns, you know, I might not be correct, but to my knowledge, I think another individual spoke on it. I don't think our guns are coming from car breaking-ins. If we really think that many cars are getting broken in, then we are not intelligent. If we want to sell a gun, we're going to report it stolen. So every report that you got is reported stolen. We go buy another one, reported stolen. If you do the research on that, you probably have habitual offenders that do that. So there again, those statistics got us over here. We not even focused on the problem. The alternative, that's my thing I'm big on. We can't tell a person to stop something and not give them an alternative, because I'm not even going to listen to what you're saying. Because if you telling me to stop robbing or selling drugs to feed my family, I got 3 kids and a wife, and you tell me to go work at McDonald's, I'm making $1,000 a day, and now here it is, I'm making barely $1,000 every 2 weeks. It don't make sense to me. That's right. So if the solutions is not going to make sense, it's laws, Project X style, those regulations is not going to stop. I didn't hear one person come up with a solution of, okay, we know how the guns is coming, we know the people who doing the shooting, but let's try to come up with a solution. Okay, when they get those guns in their hands, why are they getting those guns in their hand? They're influenced by a certain gender, music, they're influenced by the music. So now they want to be like somebody. So that's why they're going to get the guns. What is their hunger of getting these guns? Why they want to, when I was home during my time, we wanted to hide our guns. Now everybody, it's ridiculous. It's what you see, what you witness going down the street, going into the store. And I have conversations with them all the time. You know, I manage a studio, they come in there, I done put a no gun policy on that. I done lost half the clientele. I don't care, because they can't even explain to me why you need all those bullets. Like why? You know, I mean, it's a fashion statement. So, you know, I'm just big on alternative. You know, I own a selfie studio on Broad Street. I have done a lot for the community and kids. I have done Christmas programs because they don't have nowhere to go. My father was in Recreation and Parks. I go to Recreation and Parks. I'm trying to get them a couple of activities. Recreation and Parks is closed. Yes, how is Recreation and Parks closed during the Christmas holidays? Those 2 weeks they out of school. What are they going to do? Where are they going? At Jackson Ward, they walk 3-4, they in Broad Street, they looking for trouble. I bring them in plenty of times. I just hold them in there to educate them. We got to give them something that they want to do. something that interests them. And, you know, I did a thing with Black History with the Boys and Girls Club. You know, my nonprofit took care of half of the funding. And some of them I took to the studio. And it was interesting to me because one wanted to be a rapper, he wanted to be a rapper, he wanted to be a rapper, until he got into the studio and heard himself. Came out and said, yo, I don't want to be a rapper no more. And that stuck with me. Like, a lot of them might want to be or live this life until they actually in it. But sometimes it might be too late. You know, I was fortunate enough, just like the gentleman there, you know what I mean, I wasn't given a second chance. I was given a third, fourth chance. You know, brother, the foundation, you know, witness him, you know, what he does in the community is a lot. Like, to be honest with you, like, a lot of these budgets need to be doing more of that. He got a rate, basically, nobody's in this program is getting in trouble, like, after they come through him. So it's like, why more money is not going towards that type of situation? The people who really, it's a handful of us in here that I have witnessed feet on the ground. Like, that's what we need to be focused on, because we are the ones with basically the solution, and we can't be doing the same things because that's not going to work with these day and time and the technology.
Thank you, sir. We're about out of time. I want to thank everybody who took time out to stand in line. It takes courage to stand up here and ask questions. We'll kick it back to the panel up front.
All right, thank you, John, for that, and thank you, Reba, as well. We've heard so much passion tonight. The big question for all of us is what do we do next? How do we find the role models that Cruz was talking about? How do we help the schools with even more activities when everybody's facing a depleted budget? How do we tell the GA that they need to restore the funding that would at least put it up back to where it was, I think it was 15 years ago or whenever that was. So we here at Channel 6 are hoping that we can carry this passion forward, that you will hold us accountable, just like you hold the people on the stage accountable. Are you helping your neighbor? Are you sharing your passion? Are you carrying this conversation forward? And we're going to do this again.
Yeah. And as we kind of wrap up tonight, really quickly from each person up here on the panel, piggybacking on that question, what is next? What do we do? Overwhelmingly in our survey, everyone says talk less, do more. So what should be the next step? And I'm going to start with you, Mr. Swan, if you don't mind.
All right. Well, there's a couple of things that I recognize over 40 years in public service, and that is I rarely, or if ever, have run into a public servant, whether it's in the school system, social services, police department, in nonprofits. I've worked with several nonprofits as well. All of the people that have spoken today, they all want to do something good. They're here to do a good job. What I feel like we are lacking as a city and maybe as a community is I think we're lacking organizational and an organization or a structure in which we can coordinate all of those efforts. And I think that there's a pathway forward to that. I've seen that done on small scales here in the city in the past, and I know that it can be done again. And so I think that is something we need to look forward to moving forward, and that is creating some type of structure within the city that can coordinate not only law enforcement, but the nonprofit organizations and social service organizations, and create a collaboration between those so that they can leverage one another's skills. And what I mean by that is the police department, the police officers are out there on the street and they see just about everything there is to see. But however, sometimes they don't have the skill set or the resources to address all of those things. Or the school system may run into something that they can't quite address. So I know they're going to do what they can with what they have for what their mission calls for, but we need to be able to exchange that information across agencies so that we can get the right resources to the right people at the right time and create an intervention before the police department has to respond to a homicide on the street. And so I think that having worked with some of the leaders up here, I know that the wherewithal to make that happen exists. And so I think that that's something we might want to consider moving forward.
Yeah, basically a solution to what Cruz Sherman said earlier about all of these silos that we currently have. And Ms. Simmons-Williams, I know that you already gave us about 4 things that you felt we needed to work on. Just really quick, maybe just one extra or one additional comment that you have as far as next steps.
Well, basically the thing that I just whispered in Ms. McKeechen's ear over here, get rid of the silos in the technologies and the communications.
All right, wonderful.
Good.
So what can everybody here do? Here is what I challenge you to do. If you are paying for your child's cell phone, I challenge you to tell your child, I want to see your cell phone and I want your password. I challenge you as a parent to take responsibility for the cell phone that you are paying for, that your child has in school, on the streets, on the bus, everywhere, and actually look and see what your child is doing. That's my challenge.
All right. Who's going to take the challenge?
Yeah.
All right. Ms. Samuels?
For me, being a teacher, so mine is going to be revolved around school. So for me, I want to see more, I'm not sure, but you know, it's a lot of guns being brought into the schools, and the particular school I work at, we don't have like metal detectors or nothing. We have nothing that will let us know that this child brought that gun into the school today, you know, before they can even do anything with it, you know? So I really think maybe we should start metal detectors, and maybe in each school, maybe at the doors as people walk through, we could catch the guns as they walk it through, knife, anything that they're not supposed to have. Maybe we could catch it at the door, you know? So that, I would have to say, more security in the schools. That is a big thing. Child safety and not having enough security is not it. And just locking the doors just so can't nobody get into school because you know you only have one security guard, that's not it either. So then because the parents are feeling unsafe because they can't get in to see why they can't, you know, get to their child or get to the office to see why, you know, what's going on. So that, and then I would say like listening ears, you know, more people that want to listen, that want to be there for the child, not just coming to work, to get a paycheck, but actually teachers that actually want to change a child's life. That's what we need in the school system, a teacher that wants to sit down and listen, to know what's wrong with the student, to help them learn, because blockages can prevent a child from wanting to learn. And somebody said that, you know, they skipping because they don't want to be in this class. Yeah, because the class is not interesting. Or the teacher is, you know, they don't get along with the teacher they're in because the teacher, you know, you just don't get along. So things like that, just some people who want to listen. Also, I think it starts at the top. I think it starts with the principals. I think it starts with assistant principals. I think it starts with that, hiring the right person to do the job. That's what I think. I don't know, not saying that these principals don't do their job, but I have been at schools where I don't think the principals or the assistant principals are being very effective when it comes to the regulation of the school in a day. So I've seen things happen, the students get into things and get in trouble and get sent to the office but get sent right back to the classroom because the principal don't know how to handle the situation. I've seen it. No consequences, no suspension, no nothing. So I think it starts at the top. It starts with the principals, it starts with the principals, and it also starts with everybody being on one accord. The principals and the teachers needs to be on the same page. It cannot be the principals on this page and the teachers on another. The school is never going to be even, which is going to cause more problems, and you don't want the students to see that we're not even or not on the same page because that's going to cause a problem also. So I think that too. But I feel like those are my points on today.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Chief, what can we do next?
Well, I think Ms. McKeechen's statement can't be understated. I can tell you that when we see our murders and when our investigators are looking at many of those, you see it play out on those phones and on the social media. And I know those parents who have learned about that wish they could go back in time and sometimes intervene. But the overarching thought, when I look around this room, I see a lot of people that want to help. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. So we all have a role. When someone once gave me advice on how to make things better in our city, and he said, do what you do. And I thought, well, what do I do? I'm a police officer, so I'm going to do that to the best of my ability. I'm going to go out and protect people. I'm going to lead these officers so that we can make a difference in our cities. But we have a lot of people that are in this realm. whether it's the many nonprofits that are in this room right now that all have a role in that, the regular citizens, the Broken Men. I haven't met you, but I've seen you on the news. What a powerful program you guys have. And I can tell you there's many other groups like that. So do what you do to help make life a bit better for our city. RPS, Mr. Camera said it as well too, and I didn't fully appreciate how important our schools are to our kids, because it's not just education. It is therapy. It is an adult to care about you. It is a meal, and how important that is to our kids' learning. So everyone, and the media too, for organizing this. So CBS, thank you for doing this, because we're reaching our community. You're doing what you do to help make our city better. So that's what I would just say to everyone in here. Find something that you can do to make the lives a bit better for our people in our city.
Robert Bowling, what's next?
Sure. The easiest answer for me to say is to invest more in mental health supports, but that's really not the answer. I think the chief spoke to it. Everybody on this panel has talked about it today. Is we need to really connect to our children, and the most powerful thing that we can do for a kid is to tell them that we love them and commit to them. And there should not be any child in our community who does not have an adult that is connected to him or her or they and that loves them.
Bible, basic instructions before leaving earth. To the believers, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray, seek my face, turn from your evil ways, and then I will hear from heaven and forgive their sins and heal their land. My eyes will now be open and my ears will be attentive to prayer from this place.
Okay, it's not fair to go after Cruz. Truly, I would echo everything everybody said, and I would just add three more things. Vote, vote, and vote.
Yes.
So thank you all for turning out. First, I want to thank our panel.
Yes, thank you.
All of you all for spending this time with us, sharing your expertise and your passion. I want to thank the audience members. I want to thank Richmond Police for this facility. The fact that you're all here, like you've heard the folks up here say, is that you care. So we care. As we've all said, we're going to do this again at a different place perhaps. We're going to have John back. We're going to have Reba back. We're going to have this incredible crew that you see out here with the smiling faces and the blue shirts, especially Munnings. And so thank you all so much. Be safe and make sure. Oh my gosh, the interns are back there too. Wow.
And then next time also, make sure you bring a friend. Sharing is caring, so be sure to spread the word, the love, and just do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Thank you so much for coming out tonight, and we will see you next time. Have a great night.
Thank you.